From divorce to treasure hunt. The secret he found in her old attic. After 2 years, the air in the attic felt heavy, like you could actually feel it pressing down. 2 years. It had been 2 years since Clara packed one bag, left the life they'd built for a decade, and gave an explanation as thin as old paper. "I can't do this anymore, James." He just stood there in the doorway, in a home that suddenly felt like a museum to a forgotten time, and watched her drive off. He didn't fight her, didn't beg. The look in her eyes was a wall too high to even try to climb. Now, 730 days later, he was back, not to their home, but to her home. The divorce was brutally simple. She kept the house. He kept what was left of his pride. He was only here for one last, grim task, to clear out the few boxes of his life that were still sitting in the attic, a space he hadn't set foot in since the day they moved in. He pulled the cord for the folding stairs, and a familiar groan of wood and springs echoed in the quiet hall. Every step up felt like a step back in time. The smell hit him first. That unique mix of old wood, ghosts of christened single bear bowl, was weak, casting long, dancing shadows that looked like ghosts. And there they were, for cardboard boxes, taped up and labeled in his own blocky handwriting. University textbooks, wind teases past, and the faint scent of the lavender sachets Clara used to tuck into corners. The light from their clothes, sentimental junk, a monument to a life now officially packed away. He let out a long, slow breath, watching the dust motes swirl in the air. It was a simple job. Get in, get the boxes, get out, cut the final thread. He moved the first box, then the second. They felt heavier than he remembered, weighed down by more than just what was inside. As he slid the third box, sentimental junk, across the dusty floor, he heard it, a soft, scraping sound. Not cardboard on wood. Something else. Something hollow. He froze, listening. Nothing. He pushed the box again. There it was. He knelt, his knees cracking on the hardwood, and ran his hand over the floorboards. They were old and uneven, but one felt different. He pushed on its edge. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder. His curiosity is sudden, sharp needle poking to the numb blanket he'd wrapped himself in. The edge of the plank lifted, just a fraction of an inch. His heart started a slow, heavy drum against his ribs. This was a house from the 50s. Solid, but nothing special. No secrets here. He worked his fingers into the gap, splintering the wood a little, and pulled. A 3-foot section of floorboard came loose with a dusty sigh. And there, nestled in the dark space between the joists, was something that did not belong. It wasn't some old relic from a past owner. It was a box, a small wooden box, no bigger than a book, carved with a swirling pattern of leaves and vines. It looked new, cared for. He reached in, his fingers closing around the cool, smooth wood. It was way too heavy for its size. He sat back on his heels, the box in his hands, dust settling around him. This wasn't Clara's style. She was practical, a minimalist. Her sentimentality was kept to photos and handwritten cards, not ornate hidden boxes. He thought he knew everything about their life, every preference, every secret fear, every quiet joy. But as he stared at the impossible object in his hands, a single, chilling question echoed in the dusty attic. Who was the woman he had married? The box felt like a stone, pulling him down into the murky memories of the last 2 years. Their divorce wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was more like a quiet, suffocating implosion. Clara had just stopped. She stopped smiling with her eyes. She stopped suggesting their weekend hikes. She stopped talking about the future. He'd try to break through the silence, asking what was wrong, but his questions just hit a gentle, unbreakable wall of, "I'm just tired, James." And he'd believed her. He suggested vacations, cooked her favorite meals. He gave her space. Then, one Tuesday morning, that space became a chasm she decided to leap across, leaving him on the other side. Her words, "I can't do this anymore," weren't an invitation to talk. They were an epitaph. The whole process was strangely civil. Lawyers traded papers. Accounts were split. The house, which she had loved with fierce, nesting passion, was the only thing she really asked for. He didn't argue, The place was already haunted by the ghosts of their happiness. Living there alone would have been torture. He moved into a sterile downtown apartment with no memories and a view of other people's lives. His own life became a muted routine. Work, gym, takeout, sleep. Friends tried to set him up, their good intentions feeling like an insult to the life he'd lost. How could he explain to them that it wasn't just a marriage he was mourning? It felt like the death of a reality he thought was unshakable. They were James and Clara, the stable ones. The couple everyone looked to as proof that love could be quiet and steady and just last. He must have replayed their last few months together 1,000 times, searching for crack where it all went wrong. Was it the fight about his promotion and the longer hours? Her father's health scare? Or was it something smaller, a slow pileup of little resentments that finally became too heavy? He never found an answer. She never gave one. Her silence was the cruelest part of it all. And now this box. It didn't fit into any story he'd come up with. It wasn't from her life before him. The wood was too perfect, the carvings too sharp. It felt like a secret kept not from him, but during his time with her. He ran his thumb over the swirling leaves and vines. It was a beautiful language he didn't understand. He almost put it back. He could slide the floorboard into place, pile his own junk on top, and just walk away. Leave this mystery to fade into dust with everything else. It was her house, her secret. He had no right to it. The divorce papers weren't just a legal document. They were a treaty. Her life was her own now, but his hand wouldn't move. That question, who was she, wasn't an echo anymore. It was a roar. For 2 years, he'd accepted the simple, painful story. She fell out of love with him. It was a story that made him a victim, a bystander in his own life's collapse. But this box, this suggested a different story. One with hidden compartments and secret passages. A story where Clara wasn't just a woman who left, but a woman who had a life he knew nothing about. The need to understand, to finally get one piece of the puzzle that wasn't just a gaping hole, was stronger than his desire to just leave. He'd been living in the quiet aftermath for 2 years. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something that wasn't grief. It was curiosity, a dangerous, thrilling, terrifying spark in the dark. He held the box, feeling its weight, its solidness. It was real, a clue, and he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, he wasn't leaving this attic until he knew what was inside. He carried the box over to the weak circle of light from the bare bulb, hoping it could somehow shine a light on the secrets inside. He turned it over and over. No hinge, no lock, no seam. The carvings flowed seamlessly around the corners as if the box had been grown, not built. A perfect, impenetrable object. Frustration started to bubble up. Was this some kind of sick joke? A puzzle with no answer? He shook it gently. Nothing. He ran his fingers over the edges again, pressing and probing. On one side, tucked into a cluster of carved ivy, his thumb felt something give. Not a button, but a section of the carving that felt smoother, almost soft. He pressed harder. A soft click, barely audible, broke the silence. A hairline crack appeared along the top edge of the box. He lifted it off. His breath caught. The inside wasn't at all what he expected. No velvet lining or old letters. The interior was a complex mechanism of tiny wooden gears and levers like the guts of some fantasy clock. In the center, held by a delicate wooden clasp, was not a jewel or a key, but a small, tightly rolled scroll of parchment tied with a red ribbon. Beside it, in a perfectly cut recess, was a single ornate brass key. Its head was shaped like a beautiful, intricate compass rose. This was beyond anything he could have imagined. It was straight out of a fairy tale or a mystery novel. He carefully lifted the small scroll, the parchment feeling thick and expensive. He untied the ribbon and unrolled it. Written in a precise, elegant calligraphy he didn't recognize was a short, cryptic message. A riddle, where our story first turned a page and borrowed words set the stage. I wait under the gaze of bronze, silent through the dawns. Use the sun's own guide to find what's locked inside. He read it again, then a third time. Our story first turned a page. A bookstore? A library? Borrowed words seemed to point that way. They had loved bookstores, spent countless rainy Saturdays getting lost in the stacks. But which one? They'd lived in 3 different cities over 10 years, under the gaze of bronze. A statue? A plaque? That narrowed it down, but not by much. And the last line, use the sun's own guide to find what's locked inside. The sun's guide. A compass. He glanced at the brass key. Its had a perfect compass rose. A dizzying mix of confusion and excitement washed over him. This wasn't just a secret. It was a game. An incredibly elaborate, beautifully designed game. But who made it? The calligraphy wasn't Clara's hurried scrawl. This was the work of a patient, artistic hand. And why? Was this a gift she had planned for him once? For an anniversary or something? And then just abandoned when things went south? The thought sent a pang of the old, familiar grief through him. Imagining a time when she was planning something so romantic, so playful. It was like looking at a photo of someone who was gone, the image pulsing with a life that no longer existed. But this time, the feeling was different. The grief was mixed with an urgent need for answers. If he could solve this, if he could follow this path she or someone had laid out, maybe he could find his way back. Not to her, maybe, but to the truth, to an understanding that might finally let him close this chapter. He stared at the riddle, his mind racing through a decade of memories. A bookstore, a bronze statue. Our story first turned a page. The phrase snagged in his memory. On their 3rd date, he'd taken her to a tiny, cluttered bookstore in Old Port Blossom, the city where they first met. He was nervous, trying to impress her with his literary knowledge. He quoted a line from a poetry book he'd just picked up. She had laughed, a sound of pure delight that made his heart ache. And then she finished a stanza for him. That was the moment he knew, the moment he was falling in love with her, the moment their story really began. The bookstore was called The Gilded Page, and right outside by the entrance was a life-size bronze statue of Mark Twain sitting on a bench. His breath hitched. That had to be it. It was too perfect. The Gilded Page. He hadn't been to Port Blossom in years. Hadn't thought of that day in so long. But now, the memory was bright and pulsing with meaning. He looked at the key. Its compass rose had seeming to point him north, toward a city he'd left behind. The decision was made before the thought was even fully formed. He gently put the scroll and key back in the box, closed it, and tucked it securely into his jacket pocket. He grabbed his 4 boxes of junk. His original reason for being here, now feeling like a distant dream. He had to get out of the attic. He had to go to Port Blossom. The hunt was on. The 2-hour drive to Port Blossom felt like driving through a landscape of his own ghosts. Every curve in the road, every familiar town sign, dug up a memory he had carefully buried. There was a diner where they'd stopped for milkshakes. The turnoff of the hiking trail, where he'd first told her he loved her. He had actively avoided this part of the country for 2 years, creating a quarantine zone around their shared history. Now he was driving straight into its heart, armed with a puzzle box and a desperate hope. Port Blossom looked smaller than he remembered, but otherwise the same. The salty air, the quaint storefronts, the old harbor, it was all painfully familiar. He parked a few blocks away, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He felt like an intruder in his own past. Walking down the street, he felt a nervous energy he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. It was a potent mix of anxiety and excitement. He turned the corner onto the cobblestone lane of the bookstore, and there it was, The Gilded Page. The green awning was a little more faded, the gold letters a bit tarnished, but it was there, and so was the statue. Mark Twain, cast in bronze, sat on his bench for all time, a book in his lap, looking wearily amused, under the gaze of bronze. James's heart hammered. He walked up to the statue, scanning every inch of it. The bench, the book, the man himself. Where could a clue be hidden? He remembered the last line. Use the sun's own guide to find what's locked inside. The key. He took out the puzzle box, opened it, and pulled out the compass rose key. He looked from the key to the statue, his mind racing. A compass. Directions. His gaze fell on the book in the statue's bronze lap. He leaned closer. The pages were solid metal, but had faint lines etched into them. And on the corner of the right-hand page, almost hidden in a sculpted fold, was a tiny keyhole-shaped opening. You could easily mistake it for a flaw in the metal. He looked at the key in his hand. It was impossibly small, but so was the hole. Taking a deep breath, he reached out and slid the tip of the key into the opening. A perfect fit. He turned it. A faint click, and a tiny seam appeared around a square section of the book's page. A small compartment. His hands were shaking now. He pried the little bronze square open. Inside, protected from the weather, was another tightly rolled scroll of parchment, this one tied with a blue ribbon. A giddy, disbelieving laugh escaped him. It was real. This whole insane, impossible thing was real. He'd followed a cryptic clue to a hidden compartment in a public statue and opened it with a fantasy key. Someone had gone to an incredible amount of trouble to set this up. The planning, the precision, the sheer nerve of it all was staggering. He quickly grabbed the scroll, closed the compartment, and pocketed the key. He sat on the bench next to the bronze author, feeling a strange connection to the bemused statue. He felt like he'd stepped through the looking glass into a world that ran on a different kind of logic, the logic of stories and secrets. He unrolled the new scroll, the same elegant calligraphy, a new riddle, where music filled the afternoon beneath the silver-plated spoon. Your greatest gamble, a whispered plea, led you from the lonely sea. Look for the name we chose in jest, and put the alchemist to the test. Music in the afternoon, a silver-plated spoon. He was instantly thrown into another memory. Their first anniversary. He was a struggling junior architect. She was a freelance graphic designer. They had no money for anything fancy. So he'd taken her to a quirky little cafe called the Silver Spoon for high tea. It was known for its mismatched china and live classical music. He remembered how out of place they'd felt. Two kids in jeans surrounded by old ladies in hats, and how they had laughed so hard they cried. Your greatest gamble, a whispered plea. During that tea, he'd told her his dream of quitting his corporate job to start his own firm. It felt like a terrifying gamble. She didn't even hesitate. She reached across the table, took his hand, and whispered, "Do it. I believe in you." That push was what set him on the path to his own career. It was a moment that had defined their partnership. Look for the name we chose in jest, and put the alchemist to the test. This part was fuzzier. At the cafe, they joked about the stuffy atmosphere, giving the stern-looking owner a nickname. What was it? His mind strained, reaching for the memory. And then it hit him. They had been reading Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist at the time. They jokingly nicknamed the cafe owner Santiago, after the book's hero, because he watched over his little cafe like it was his own personal treasure. Put the alchemist to the test. The book. It had to be the book. He stood up, his mind spinning. This clue was even more personal. It wasn't just about a place. It was about their shared dreams, private jokes, their history. Whoever made this didn't just know their story. They knew how it felt. But this clue also came with a chilling problem. The Gilded Page bookstore was one thing, a public place. But the Silver Spoon Cafe had closed down 5 years ago. He knew that for a fact. He'd seen the for lease sign himself. The building was still there, but it was now a yoga studio. How could there be a clue in a place that didn't exist anymore? The treasure hunt had just taken a sharp turn from a nostalgic trip to a complex puzzle. This wasn't going to be as straightforward as he thought. The rabbit hole was getting deeper. If you're loving this journey of discovery, don't forget to subscribe for more captivating stories that uncover the hidden secrets of the past. You never know what might be waiting in the dust, ready to be found. Going back to where the Silver Spoon Cafe used to be felt different. The bookstore was a living piece of his past. This was a grave site. The quirky, cluttered cafe was gone, replaced by a sleek, minimalist facade with urban nirvana yoga written in a serene, soulless font. The big front window where they'd sat watching the rain was now frosted over. He stood across the street, feeling completely out of place. The riddle was specific. Look for the name we chose in jest, and put the alchemist to the test. Santiago. The alchemist? How could he possibly get to something related to a book inside a private yoga studio? He ran through his options. What was he going to do? Just walk in and ask, "Excuse me, I'm on a treasure hunt for my ex-wife. Did you happen to find a copy of The Alchemist with a clue inside when you renovated?" They'd think he was crazy. He needed more information. He walked around the block, his mind racing. The building was old, part of a historic row of brick townhouses. A narrow alley ran along its side. He slipped into it, the air smelling of damp brick and garbage. He scanned the side of the building. Windows all closed. A fire escape too high to reach. Then he saw it. Near the back, at ground level, was a small, grated window, the kind that let a little light into a basement. It was filthy and half covered by a dead vine. He knelt, tried to peer through the grate. It was dark, but he could make out the rough stone walls of a cellar. Looked like it was used for storage, old boxes and junk. A dead end. He was about to give up when his eyes caught a flicker of movement. A rat. It scurried along the base of the wall and vanished behind a stack of old floorboards. But for a split second, it was lit up by a sliver of light from somewhere deeper inside. It wasn't completely dark down there. He stood up, his heart starting to pound again. It was a long shot, a crazy idea, but it was the only one he had. He had to get into that basement. But how? He walked to the end of the alley, which opened into a small service parking lot. A heavy steel door stood there, without a doubt locked. He walked back to the front of the building, a reckless plan forming in his mind. He pulled out his phone and looked up the yoga studio schedule. A class was starting in 15 minutes. He walked in. The air was thick with eucalyptus and patchouli. A woman with a calm smile greeted him. "Namaste," she said. "Here for the 4:30 vinyas?" "Actually," James began, trying to sound believable, "I'm with the city's Historical Preservation Society. We're doing a routine structural survey of some of the older buildings on this block. I just need a quick look at the foundation in the basement. Won't take more than a few minutes." He held his breath. Her serene smile didn't move. "Oh, of course. Happy to cooperate. The basement access is just through the back. But I should warn you, it's a mess. The landlord just uses it for storage." "That's fine," James said, his relief so intense it almost made him dizzy. "I'm used to a bit of dust." She led him through a tranquil studio to a small, unmarked door. "Here you are. The light switch is at the bottom of the stairs. Just let me know when you're done." He thanked her and went down the rickety wooden stairs. He flicked the switch. A single bulb lit up a space that hadn't been cleaned in decades. It was just as he'd seen. Stone walls, dirt floor, piles of junk. Now what? He was in. But where was the clue? He scanned the room. Looked for the name we chose in jest. He was looking for a book in all this mess? It seemed hopeless. He started searching, moving dusty boxes and old paint cans, feeling more and more foolish. What was he doing? Lying his way into a stranger's basement. The romantic thrill of the hunt was fading fast, replaced by the cold, damp reality of it. He was about to give up when he noticed something odd. In one corner, a section of the stone wall was different. The stones were smaller, the mortar a different color, making a rough square. It looked like an old coal chute that had been sealed up. He ran his hand over it. One of the stones felt loose. He wiggled it. It moved. He pulled, and the stone came free, leaving a dark hole. He peered inside. Nothing. He reached his hand in, feeling around in the dark. His fingers brushed against something with pages. His breath caught. He carefully worked it out. It was a book, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the damp. He unwrapped it. The cover was worn, but he could just make out the title. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. He sank to the floor, leaning against the cold stone wall, the book in his hands. A wave of awe hit him, so hard it almost brought him to tears. This wasn't a game left by Clara. The complexity, the planning, the sheer engineering of this. Hiding a clue in a public statue, sealing another inside a basement wall of a building she couldn't have known would become a yoga studio. This was the work of a master. Clara wasn't the architect. She was a player, just like him. They were both following a map laid out by someone else. He opened the book. Tucked inside the front cover was the next scroll, tied with a green ribbon. And beneath it, something else. A small black and white photo of a man and a woman on a beach, laughing. The woman was a younger version of Clara's mother. The man, He'd never seen him before. He had a kind, intelligent face and eyes that crinkled at the corners. On the back, in that same elegant handwriting, was a note: Eleanor and Arthur, summer 1968. Arthur, Clara's grandfather, the one who had passed away right before their wedding, the one she adored. Suddenly, 1,000 forgotten details clicked into place. Clara's love for puzzles and escape rooms, her fascination with old maps, her stories about her grandfather, the brilliant, eccentric engineer who built puzzle boxes for her when she was a kid. James looked at the man in the photo, the ghost who had been pulling his strings. This entire treasure hunt was his creation, a game designed by a man long dead. But why? And why now? He unrolled the new scroll. The riddle was different. It was a sequence of numbers and symbols. A cipher. 34.0428 degrees north, 118.2887 degrees west. The heart of the campus, where muses sleep. Find my legacy, my magnum opus, hidden where the new seeds sleep. The final key is not of brass, but of understanding. The alchemist cipher holds the last pass. Coordinates. A quick search on his phone confirmed it. The University of Southern California, a central spot on the main campus. Clara's grandfather had been a distinguished engineering professor there for over 30 years. Find my legacy, my magnum opus, hidden where the new seeds sleep. The final line chilled him. The alchemist cipher holds the last pass. The alchemist cipher. It was the title of a fictional book from an old detective novel they both loved. In the story, it was a legendary, unsolvable code. It had become their private joke for any problem that seemed impossible. This wasn't about his past with Clara anymore. It was about her past, her family, her grandfather, and he was being led, step by step, right to the center of it. He had to go to Los Angeles. He had to find what Arthur had hidden. He had to understand the point of this whole posthumous quest. He had to solve the alchemist cipher. The flight to Los Angeles felt unreal. 24 hours ago, he was just a man tying up loose ends. Now he was a detective, a treasure hunter, flying across the country on the trail of a ghost. He clutched the puzzle box, which now held the 3 scrolls, the brass key, and the photo of Eleanor and Arthur. They felt less like clues and more like sacred objects. The USC campus was a beautiful world of brick buildings and green lawns. The coordinates led him to a large, open plaza at the university's heart, with a majestic fountain. The heart of the campus, where muses sleep. He was in the right place. The next line was his guide. Find my legacy, my magnum opus, hidden where the new seeds sleep. His legacy, as a professor, his legacy would be his work. James walked toward the main engineering building. Stepping inside felt like entering a sacred space. This was Arthur's world. He found a faculty directory. There, under Professors Emeriti, was his name, Dr. Arthur Vance. A small portrait showed the same man from the photo, older now, in a tweed jacket with those same intelligent eyes. The directory mentioned a special collection of his papers and models housed in the university library. His magnum opus. The last part of the riddle was the trickiest. Hidden where the new seeds sleep. He walked toward the library, puzzling over the phrase. New seeds. New students? Freshmen? It felt too simple. As he got closer to the library, he passed a newly built wing, the Dr. Arthur Vance Center for Innovative Design. A donation from an anonymous benefactor had funded it after his death. On the dedication plaque was a quote from Dr. Vance. Every problem is a seed for a new solution to grow. New seeds. The Center for Innovative Design. This had to be it. The inside was modern and sleek, filled with 3D printers, laser cutters, and students working on complex designs. And in the center of the main atrium, inside a large glass case, was Arthur's legacy. It was a stunning collection of his puzzle boxes, mechanical models, and hand-drawn schematics. It was an exhibition of a brilliant mind. He circled the case, mesmerized. There were dozens of objects. How was he supposed to find a clue in all this? He reread the last lines of the cipher. The final key is not of brass, but of understanding. The alchemist cipher holds the last pass. His eyes scanned the case again, and this time he saw it. In the very center, on a raised stand, was a book, not an engineering textbook. It was a beautiful, one-of-a-kind, leather-bound volume. Embossed in gold on the cover was the title, The Alchemist's Cipher. His heart stopped. The fictional book from the novel. Arthur had made it real. This was his masterpiece. He found a student docent and, with a surprisingly steady voice, asked about it. "Oh, that's the professor's masterpiece," the student said, her eyes lighting up. "It's the only puzzle he ever made that no one has ever solved. Not his students, not his colleagues, not even his family. He said it was designed for a very specific person, and only they would have the key of understanding to open it. The final key is not of brass, but of understanding." James looked at the book. It was locked with a series of rotating concentric rings etched with symbols, numbers, and letters. A cryptex. A combination lock of incredible complexity. The last pass. The password. It had to be a word or phrase only the intended person would know. He thought back through the entire journey. The bookstore. The cafe. The riddles were about his memories with Clara. The journey was designed to make him remember. What was the common thread? It was about their beginning, about the moments that built their story. He thought of the poetry quote he'd started on their third date, the one she'd finished, the one that made him fall in love. It was from an E. Cummings poem. He remembered the first line, but what was the rest? He pulled out his phone and searched for it. The poem appeared. He read it, and the breath left his body. Tucked inside the poem was a phrase they had adopted as their own private motto in the early days. He looked at the cryptex. He began to turn the rings, his fingers moving with a new certainty, spelling out the password, the key of understanding, TRUSDYURHERT. With a final, satisfying click, the lock disengaged. The docent stared, her mouth open. "No one's ever done that before," she whispered. With trembling hands, James lifted the heavy cover. The final reveal. Inside, the pages weren't filled with ciphers or puzzles. They were filled with that same elegant handwriting. But it wasn't a riddle. It was a letter. And it began with two words that shattered his world and rebuilt it in the same instant. "My dearest Clara." He sat on a bench in the atrium, not even noticing the students staring, and began to read. The book wasn't just a letter. It was a conversation across time, from a grandfather to his beloved granddaughter. "My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, it means you have completed the first part of your journey. Or perhaps life has taken an unexpected turn, and you have completed it with the one person I hoped you would share it with. I have always believed that the greatest things in life are not found, but built. A career, a home, a life, and most of all, love. Love is not a treasure you stumble upon. It is a structure you build together, piece by piece, with patience, communication, and a shared set of blueprints. I designed this treasure hunt for you and your husband to complete together. It was to be my wedding gift to you both. A game, an adventure, but more than that, a lesson. A reminder that the foundation of your life together is built on shared memories and the courage to take gambles on each other. I wanted you to revisit the places where your love was forged, to remind yourselves of the blueprints you created together." The words started to blur as James's eyes filled with tears. This whole time, he was a ghost walking through his own memories. Now he understood. This journey was meant for two. The box in the attic was delivered to you by my lawyer on your first anniversary. I know you, my dear. I know your heart, and I know your fear. My passing left a hole in your life. But you have always been better at solving external puzzles than you are at navigating the labyrinth of your own heart. I suspect you received the box, and you hid it. You felt the pressure of this grand romantic gesture, and you felt you and James had to be perfect to deserve it. You waited for the right moment. But life is never perfect, Clara. Love is not about waiting for a sunny day. It's about learning to dance together in the rain. As the small, everyday storms of marriage began, I fear you saw this gift not as a tool to help, but as a test you were failing. James had to stop. He put his head in his hands, a sob catching in his throat. The cold woman who had left him was dissolving, replaced by the image of someone he'd never really seen. A young woman grieving her hero, struggling under the weight of an impossible standard, terrified of failure. He kept reading. And so I built a contingency. I am an engineer after all. I planned for system failure. I only met James a few times, but I saw the way he looked at you. He is a good, steady man. I knew that one day, the end of your marriage would require clearing out the old life. I knew he would have to go back to the attic. The puzzle box was not just for you. It was a fail-safe, a distress beacon. The journey he has taken to get here is different from the one you would have taken together. For him, it has been a journey into a past he thought he understood, designed to show him the pieces he couldn't see. For you, it was meant to be a journey of rediscovery. Maybe now, it can be a journey of reconciliation. The divorce. I can't pretend to understand the pain you have both been through, but I know my granddaughter. You didn't leave because you stopped loving him. You left because you were afraid. Afraid that the love you were building wasn't living up to the blueprints you had in your head. The blueprints of your parents, of me and your grandmother. You thought the structure was failing, so you got out before it could collapse. You chose a clean break over the messy, difficult work of renovation. The treasure, my dear Clara, was never at the end of this hunt. It was in the hunt itself. It is the realization that a relationship is a living thing, a constant project. It requires you to keep solving puzzles together, to keep communicating, to keep choosing each other, especially when it's hard. This book is a final piece. The Alchemist Cipher is not the code in the lock. It is the truth on these pages, the truth that it is never too late to start building again. You don't have to rebuild the same house. You can design something new, something stronger, built on honesty and forgiveness. Give him this book. Let him read my words. And then, for the first time in a long time, show him your own blueprints. Talk to him. The real treasure is not a secret hidden in an attic. It's the honest conversation you have yet to have. All my love, always. Grandpa Arthur James closed the book, the weight he'd been carrying in his chest for 2 years. It was just gone. In its place was this huge, aching sense of clarity. The pain wasn't gone, but it had changed. It was no longer the dull ache of an inexplicable loss. It was a sharp, clean pain of a wound finally seeing the light of day. He had been so lost in his own grief, he'd never considered the depth of hers. He saw her leaving as a rejection of him. He never saw it for what it was, an act of fear. She wasn't running from him. She was running from herself, from the ghost of her grandfather and the weight of his expectations. He thought of Clara, living alone for 2 years in that house, haunted by the same memories, but also by this massive, unspoken secret. The treasure hunt she could never start. The conversation she was too afraid to have. His anger, the resentment he'd held on to, it all just evaporated. All he felt was a profound, heartbreaking empathy. He stood up, holding the leather-bound book that held the story of their undoing and the blueprint for their future. He walked out of the atrium, past a glass case of puzzles, and into the California sun. For the first time in 2 years, the path forward wasn't fog. It was a single, clear step. He took out his phone, his thumb hovering over her name. He hadn't called her in over a year. Their communication had shrunk to curt texts about mail and logistics. What would he even say? He scrolled past her name and found a different one. Her mother, Eleanor, the woman in the photo. He hit call. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "James." "Eleanor," he said, his own voice sounding strange to him. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue. I need to see Clara. It's important. Can you tell me if she's home?" There was a long pause. "James, I don't know if that's a good idea." "Please," he interrupted, his voice cracking. "Just please. Tell her I solved the Alchemist Cipher." Another silence, this one filled with disbelief. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was just a whisper. "I'll tell her you're on your way." The trip back wasn't a flight to his sterile apartment, but a drive back to the house that was once theirs, and was now hers, a drive toward the hardest and most important conversation of his life. He didn't know what would happen. He didn't know if a marriage, once broken, could really be mended. The book didn't promise a happy ending. It only offered a new beginning, It wasn't about erasing the past, but understanding it. As he pulled onto her street, he saw her. She was standing on the porch, silhouetted against the warm light of the living room, waiting. He got out of the car, holding the leather-bound book. He walked up the path to the woman he thought he knew, the woman he had lost, the woman he was finally about to meet. The treasure hunt was over, but the real work, the messy, beautiful, human work of building something together, was just about to begin. So, what did you think of James's discovery? Let us know in the comments below. Sometimes the things we think we've lost are just waiting in a dusty corner for us to find the right key. For more stories about secrets, hidden paths, and the unexpected journeys that change our lives, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know what story will unlock something in you.